What's up? I'm Pico, and welcome to the first video I'm making on this channel. For people who follow my Twitter and know me through competitive Splatoon, you may have seen I was talking about doing things like this. I want to have, pretty low edited or maybe just not edited at all videos, just talking about just like discussing things in Splatoon. From, sometimes it might be a community conversation I want to join in on and give a bit more of a developed response. Maybe sometimes I want to bring up an idea of my own, or sometimes maybe I'll just want to, post gameplay or something. I basically just want to have this channel open to do what I want with in a bit more of a laid back fashion. For people that know me in my competitive team, Azure, you might know that we have our own YouTube channel there uh, that has a bit more educational, like fleshed out kind of content with better looking graphics. It's very highly edited, those kind of things. I definitely like those videos, but they're a lot of effort to put out. I need to wait for teammates to do their part in the production and all that. So that's a bit more just educational and broad and slow to put out, like I said. So sometimes I want to just do something on my own like this. That's a bit more laid back, a bit more discussion based. See, just throw out ideas, see what other people think, uh, yeah, just get people talking because I think the community can benefit from that. So what I want to talk about today, sorry for the long intro, is one tricking. A week or so ago, a lot of Splatoon Twitter was talking about this, saying how in the West, one tricking weapons is pretty uncommon. Japan sees it a fair bit. Here, not really. And people were basically discussing, the strengths and weaknesses of being a flex player versus being a one trick. For people that don't know what one tricking is, it's essentially when you just have one weapon, or perhaps some very similar weapons to each other, and you just use those all the time. That's all you do. I'll go to what I'm currently quote unquote one tricking is Slosher. So for me, you expect basically all the time I'm gonna be on like Soda Slosher or Vanilla Slosher. Maybe I'll play Slosh Deco. I don't really see a need to, but I could. Like these would be the three weapons. That's all I'd really do. Calling myself a Slosher one trick. But we could also say, if you're a slosher one trick, it wouldn't be too far gone to say you want to also play like Tri Slosher. Sure, this weapon it's a bit different from normal slosher. It's faster, less range, less damage. Hitbox is a bit different, but the core mindset, the core playstyle, and the main like mechanics of the weapon are still the same. You still want to be playing for your weird janky hitboxes. The projectiles still move in a similar fashion to each other. You're still, pretty aggressive, positioning based weapon. So bouncing between like tri-slosher and normal slosher is not a huge stretch. You could technically, quote unquote, one trick those two different weapons. But if I were to like also throw in like, okay, let's say I'm playing sloshers, like, okay, should I add blob blobber into that pool? I don't know. If the point you're playing tri-slosher, normal slosher, and blob blobber, you're not exactly one tricking them. Blob blobber is insanely different from the other two sloshers. Sure, it's still in the slosher class, but these projectiles are nothing like the way this weapon wants to position and play the game is just like insanely off of what normal slosher and try want to do. So at that point, you're not really one tricking. You can also look at it more, not just how the main weapons are to each other, like similar, but also just the playstyles. A common thing you'll see in the West is, let's say someone is a self-proclaimed armor support. I'm not the biggest fan of labeling playstyles, but the West does it a lot. So just to compare it to things people know, let's say Junior and Enzap are very common armor support weapons. Someone could play those two weapons and basically call themselves a one trick of that role. They're always looking to paint the map a lot, they're looking to get a lot of specials, they're looking to throw bombs to help teammates in fights, get chip damage on other opponents, kill enemies that are overextended, but th're not really the ones initiating themselves. They're holding a lot of space for their team, giving their teammates a lot of chip damage, armors to break in. They're just they're just getting everyone in and holding ground. Zap can do that, Junior can do that. They're very similar ways to each other. So sure, like NZAP, much more range than Junior, better accuracy. That has a suction bomb instead of splat bomb, the better mobility. But at the end of the day, the playstyle is very similar. So you can see one tricking in the case that you're not doing just truly one weapon, as either very similar weapons in playstyle or similar weapons in just how they function. Like in the case of Slosher and Tri-Slosher, or like Junior and NZ. But for most of what I want to talk about in this video, I want to be talking about the instance of one-tricking, just like truly one-tricking just one weapon and its different kits. I'll go back to Slosher for a bit for this. So when people talk about one-tricking, there's usually like the main points that come up, saying like, why is one-tricking good? The first things you'll probably hear are things along the lines of you'll build mechanics with that one weapon very quickly. You'll be a lot more confident. You'll stop doubting certain situations. Like if you, let's say I'm a Slosher approaching a T-Tech. If I'm one-tricking Slosher, I just know like that I can hit the T-Tech without the T-Tech hitting them. Without the T-Tech hitting me, I mean. I just know that from all the engagements that the T-Tech has to get to a certain point in my range before I'm threatened by it, so I can space it out in a certain way and generally win that fight. Or if there's a situation that the T-Tech like can easily close distance, I probably just shouldn't take that fight. I just like know for sure what these situations are going to be like. So I'm confident, and I'm not doubting this. I'm playing the game quickly. I'm making decisions quickly. Not to mention just like I would know the mechanics of the weapon in and out very well. I would know that if I need to approach a certain situation and fight it a certain way, I know that I can execute that fight the way I think I need to do it. Just because, like, I know the range, I know the hitboxes, I know the fire rate, I know the movement, I know the pain output. Like, everything about these weapons, or the weapon that's being one-tricked, is just, I know it like the back of my hand. Don't have to spend a moment thinking about it. And yes, these are absolutely strengths of one-tricking a weapon. There's no doubt about it. There's other benefits I think also don't get brought up that much. One mainly that I haven't really heard people say is also when it comes, especially to playing in a competitive team environment. One tricking a weapon can also change your like mentality as to how to evaluate your own gameplay, both individually and in the team. One thing that a lot of people will do, especially when they're flexing weapons a lot, like flexing basically just switching between weapons a lot between games, you'll likely see them like in one tournament set or in one scrim, you're unlikely to see them stay on one weapon the whole time. They're flexing around depending on the map mode, depending on what they think their team needs and all that. If you're one-tricking a weapon, let's say a game goes poorly, and you think, okay, it went poorly because my team didn't have a lot of paint output. Some teams might say, okay, we had a splatter shot player. They didn't do that hot. We need more paint. Let's just tell them to play NZAP for a game. And like, yes, sure, short term, you're probably going to have more paint that game because that person on NZAP, their weapon can paint pretty well. They're probably just more inclined because of how they know Zaps usually play the game. They're probably naturally going to play a bit more passive and reactively and just be painting the map to build special. So sure, you're going to have more paint. But long term, those players, like let's say they get in the same situation, they go back to their original comp, and they lose again because again they think they don't have a lot of paint. Now they're just again going to say just switch to Zap. But what if then now that the Zap switched, let's say in this set they need more aggressive play, but now the T-Tech player that was playing well aggressively is now a Zap who wants to paint, and now you're lacking aggression. Now you're kind of in a cycle. It's like, do we switch? Like you lose again. It's like, okay, do we switch them back to T-Tech and bring our aggression back? But then what about our paint? So when you get in that kind of cycle, like that can happen when you think about flexing a lot. If you're one tricking, let's say the T-Tech team still thinks they don't have a lot of paint, then perhaps the team at large will start to think like, okay, maybe we need to spend a moment like before just holding forward into the enemy base. Maybe one or two people stay back, or maybe everyone, depending on what's going on. Focus on painting the map a bit more, playing a bit slower, just to ensure that we have a lot more map control, and then we push up with this aggression. And that's probably going to help them long term. They'll identify when that needs to happen, and in general, they'll have more paint control without actually having to change up their comps. They'll still have the main strength they had before, of like that strong aggressive style, but now like the paint's not as big of an issue because they've acknowledged it and they've thought about a way to fix it. So now you still get the benefits of your crazy mechanics on your one-trick weapon, and you're starting to think more openly about how to solve issues your team might have, or even just you individually. I think that's one benefit of one-tricking that's really overlooked. And a way to describe this is also something, well, first off, the main thing that made me want to do this conversation here was especially seeing Chara, Pro Chara, very well-known player. His Twitter threads and his stream went over some of this. And one thing he said for a weapon to be a good one trick is for it to be very adaptable. For it to, you can play against different types of teams, be with different kinds of teams, encounter different map mode combinations, and still be able to contribute to the game effectively. And I think this is a big part of it. Because at first, you might look at a certain weapon and say like, sure, it can paint a lot, but maybe like so it might be good on zones. But you look at tower control and you're like, it's not that good at stopping tower. The paint's not needed that much. Maybe it's not a good tower pick. I can't one trick this. But when you start thinking about like what I said before, when you start evaluating ways that you can address these issues that aren't like immediately obvious when you're one tricking, you can start to solve these issues. And one weapon I one tricked for a very long time that I think is a really good example for this is Blob Blobber. It's easily my favorite weapon in the game. I would one trick it still if I could. I'll get more into that later. But one issue a lot of people say about this weapon, they'll see it and they'll say, okay, it paints really well, it does good damage against objects. Like, okay, it's good in Rainmaker, it'll pop a lot of shields. It's good in zones, it'll keep the zone a lot, it'll keep the enemy out of zone. It'll get a lot of specials to keep the zone painted. It's good on these modes. But what about tower control? I don't think Blob's good on tower control, is what a lot of people would tell you. It doesn't. The main weapon is really bad at shooting on the tower. It can't stop the tower very well. But in my experience, that's not really the case. You can adapt your playstyle, you can identify what the weapon can do, and still make it work. I think Tower is actually one of Blob's better modes, because Tower, what a lot of it is about, is especially with checkpoints in this game, it's about staging pushes or defenses at these important checkpoint spots or just other chokeholds to keep the game going in your favor or to swing it back. And what Blob does really well, sure it can't, like, on the tower pool, it can't shoot it very well. Actually, let's see, is tower control in recon? That'd be helpful. Like, sure, it can't shoot the tower very well, but what it can do, shoot around the tower, it can shoot high grounds well. I switched off Blob, but yeah, it can shoot high grounds really well where people might be defending or pushing from. It clears around the tower really well. It's just the tower itself that it struggles with. So the way to play Blob normally, like Rainmaker zones, it's playing around the objective itself a whole bunch. If you throw it here, you can adapt it to this style. You can play a lot more aggressively, a lot more focused around fights than you normally would, and still get a lot of success with it. Let's say you're pushing tower here. Like Blob doesn't want to be shooting at the tower if it's standing right here, but you can shoot up here, you can shoot up here, you can check this, you can check all of this. Like this is where the enemy team would want to defend tower on the first check on Port Mackerel. They don't want to be up here, and like man can Blob handle it, especially with its kits. You know, throw a storm up there, throw a wall down here if someone drops. They're not going to have a good time. So those kind of playstyle adaptations can happen when you explore a weapon a lot, when you one trick it, so it can become more adaptable than you might originally think. And I think that's also a big issue when people look into weapons to one trick. More can be one tricked than you expect to be able to do it, honestly. And that's also something I'll bring up. But I want to stay on the topic of being adaptable a little bit longer. So one thing that also helps weapons be adaptable is the different kits and the different gear you can run with these weapons. For Blob, I usually played vanilla when I used it. I went to Blob Deco on just certain zones maps where Section Rush was really strong. But in general, I favored this kit. It felt like I could stay alive longer and ship more into fights, which is a bit more of what my team needed from me. Sure, the still inherent like zoning painting powers of the Blob itself were still like very present even without the super painter kit that is Deco. So what I did a lot was I pulled up a few of my old builds here. I did different builds to adapt to certain situations, different map modes, different team matchups, all that. So this is like my generic build. You can swim speed lets me move around quickly to assist fights. A bit of Inksaver main for some more shots. QR because this weapon doesn't get a lot of picks on its own. It's a lot of assists and all that. So QR activates pretty often, even if you don't die that much. But let's say, okay, the map's like New Albacore Hotel. I find it on that map. I'm either positioning on grates a lot because they're good positions to shoot into mid, or once we have control, I want to flank their right side over the bridge. So on that map, I'd run something like this, where like sure, it looks kind of crazy inherently. Like you think about good builds to run on blob, run speed doesn't come to mind. But when you one trick a weapon, you start to identify in very niche situations where you want certain strengths or weaknesses, or want to switch up your playstyle. Like these kind of builds can evolve. On Albacore, again, I played on Greats so much, I'd either fight there or want to cross them quickly. So like, sure, run speed, why not? It's gonna get me where I want to be, like just way quicker and help me fight better on these positions. Sure, I basically only used it on Albacore, but it was really effective there. Another example is this was actually my tower control build to add on a bit more. You might be thinking like, what? Looking at this initially, you said you're playing it more aggressively. Why do you have tenacity? But basically, what this build was doing was tenacity. Basically, like the weapon when I was pushing up, I didn't care that much about my kit. I'd say I had a tower like splash wall on aggro can help, but I really didn't need like Storm that often. It was helpful when I got it, but I wasn't playing around it. So what this build does is on defense, we already said Blob is not that good at stopping tower, and you're wanting to stop tower more on defense, of course. That just makes sense. But what the part of Blob that can handle the tower is the special. So what this build did was, let's say my team gets wiped, our push ends, we start to defend and we mess up a bit. Our spawns are kind of staggered, the enemy team is getting closer. So what this is going to do is like, if I died on the stagger, the special saver is going to keep my meter up. And I can wait around while the rest of my team respawns and slows down to stop the stagger. And while that's happening, we probably have numbers disadvantage, so I'm building special through this tenacity. And then once my team is finally all together, I have Storm. And Storm, unlike the main weapon of Blob, like I said, is really good at stopping the tower. So that was an adaptation to TC in particular. This really, like, most people don't think about playing Blob that way, or they wouldn't think that it could play effectively in a certain situation. But like this on TC, I thought it was really strong. So just, that was a huge tangent about Blob, but just wanted to add out, how weapons can adapt when you one trick them, how much you can flesh them out, and explore their different strengths. Another way I want to talk about a weapon can be adaptable. Blob was not a good example of this, but let me pick Luna. Luna, there's not a lot of Luna Blaster one tricks. There's basically no Luna Blaster one tricks anymore that I know about in the West. But the way that this weapon might adapt, instead of running a bunch of different types of gear builds to adapt to different map modes, it can bounce around a lot between its different kind of kits. You see, Vanilla is really aggressive as the Splat Bomb and as this Baller. It can take a lot of space, it can run in, it can just fight after fight after fight. It doesn't really care if it's trading out or getting doubles then trading out. Like, it's being effective, being aggressive. But let's say you're in a map mode now where you want to play farther back, you want more chip damage, more paint, you kind of want to slow down your playstyle. Then you can go to Kensa Luna. Extremely different. Like, it still has the core strengths of the Luna Blaster, where you can run up, hold ZR, take fights, because it's a Luna, like it's gonna win fights up close. You can still approach someone and trade them, or kill someone that overextends on you. But the kit lets you be effective from a lot farther range, lets you paint a lot more than vanilla would. But then even let's say certain situation comes up, you might actually find a use for Luna Neo. Like if you're a Luna Blaster one trick, let's say there's one map where you feel like you stay alive kind of long, you want like a lot of paint, and you just like, especially in a zone scenario, let's say where you feel like you wait for the enemy to push into you a lot more than you push into them. You might actually think placing mines and building cheap suction rushes might be a way to go. I don't know. I'm not a Luna one trick. Don't think anyone has thought about it that far. That's just an example. Like this kit does offer a different playstyle than vanilla does and like Kensa does. If you one tricked it, you might find a use for it. And it's again a built-in adaptation. Like these kits, the different kits that weapons have in this game in general just offer different playstyles than each other. Like they're inherent adaptations just by design. Now, let's talk about deciding a weapon to one trick. This is what I keep putting off. I keep referencing that I'll be talking about. So, how do you decide what you want to one trick? Let's say, okay, this was interesting to listen to. I don't currently one trick something. How do I choose? The most important thing right off the bat, I'm going to say, it needs to be something that you really enjoy playing and that you're really curious about exploring. For me, like this was absolutely what Blob was. Most people look at Blob, especially in competitive, they say this is not a strong weapon, it's not adaptable, but like I said, I've found success in various ways through exploring it. But that's also because I just really enjoy playing it, and I was driven to do so. I was driven to explore it in these ways and flesh it out in a way that I could play it whenever I wanted. And the weapon just over time felt stronger and stronger. And because I enjoyed it, because I found these different strengths and different play styles, like I just felt better with it. And as I got better with it, I enjoyed it even more. It never got tiring. That's very important. It's a big reason why people flex in the first place, is so the game doesn't feel stale to them. Like if you're always encountering the same struggles when you play, the game can get really frustrating, really old. You don't really want to play that much anymore. Um, and those kind of issues come up when you're just not enjoying what you're doing or you don't feel very open-minded about it. And one thing, the biggest issue I'd say, or the biggest thing that causes that to happen is people will try to pick around the meta. For people that don't know, the meta is what people consider to be the strongest weapons in the game. Right now, the meta is probably the most diverse that it's ever been in this game's history, but still people will be inclined to say, like, let's say you're choosing between one-tricking 96 gal or like L3. Most people will tell you L3 is the stronger weapon, so you should play it. But let's say like you're not super interested in L3, or you don't exactly understand what about it is appealing to you or what about it is strong. You're just playing it because people told you it's good and you should play it. If you become an L3 one trick in that scenario, sure, the weapon's good, so you're going to get some results, but like long term you might get burnt out, you might feel stagnant in your progression, or you might just even like not be playing it to its fullest potential or the way that matches you best. Especially in a scenario where like if you're like not in competitive, or if you are but you're currently a free agent, you just do like all sorts of pickups, you can really like, you're free to focus on what you enjoy the most and let that drive your decision. In team scenarios, it can make it a bit more difficult. For example, like the reason why I dropped Blah Blobber, like I still love the weapon, I still think it's great, but the reason why I stopped playing it is because my team, we needed more aggression, and Blah Blobber, like my other teammates just inherently play a bit more like reactively than I do, a bit more passive. So I needed something that I still enjoy, I still feel confident in, but can just take more space, be a bit more risky than Blob could. And the best match in my weapon repertoire, or interested weapons, was Sloshers. I came back to it. And I also play Inkbrush for people that know, but right now, like, Sloshers is the more interesting example here. But like, I'm still happy with Sloshers. It's not like I dislike it. I'm still fascinated by it, just not quite to the level Blob is. But like I was saying, you definitely want to have that weapon be something you're passionate about, because it gives you just that rolling snowball of interest, finding a way to adapt it, improving because you adapted it, feeling more confident, and then it makes you again like, okay, a new issue arises, but now I feel like I can handle it. Let's approach it again, open-minded. Let's assess my weaknesses, see if we can adapt it. You just get better and better at just solving solving problems with your weapon and problems with your playstyle without changing your weapon, and you just start feeling like you're just really strong as a player. And that's very important. Like, mentality is very important in this game in general. And if you can just build a strong level of confidence, strong mentality, adaptability with that one weapon that you're really strong with, it's just like, man, you become a really strong player really quickly. It's good stuff to see. Now let's say, again, I was talking about the meta. I got distracted. Let's go back to that for a moment. The meta is, people will tell you one weapon is really strong, you should play it over another. But if your weapon is, like, if you're really, let's use an example. Let me pin down an example so I can get my thoughts together. Let's compare Glugas to like 96. Let's say you want to one-trick Glugas. You're really passionate about them. You just find them really fun. Whatever it is, you really want to one-trick them. But you play with someone and someone says, I don't really like Glugas. You should use 96 instead. They're really similar kits, really similar playstyles. You can compare them pretty well. But your Glugas are just, you don't enjoy 96. You don't play as well with it. You don't like the way it moves. You really like the different qualities that Gluga gives you. Then basically just, say, no, I'm not going to play this weapon. Like, you might feel pressured by other people saying, no, you should play 96. But like, why should you listen to them? I mean, especially if you're not in a team environment. Like, who really cares? If you play better with these, you enjoy these better, it's kind of the fault of other people for being so butthurt that you want this, and not actually realizing how much better you are with them, or not respecting that you're better with them. They just want you to have the meta labeled weapon. And this isn't even meta. This is just a random example. Like in a world where people respected 96 more, I think people should respect 96 more. But in a world where people did, then you could draw this parallel. And again, relating this back to myself, like I picked up Blob out of all the interest I said I had in it. Like no one ever recommends you pick up Blob in this community, but you can do it. You really can. Or like in reality, I think there's very few weapons that you can't one trick in this game. I'll be honest. Like even if you want to play Sploosh, like sure, I don't think you should play a lot of vanilla Sploosh. Maybe you can find a use for it, but like Sploosh 7 is really strong, and like even Sploosh Neo has a lot of moments I think it's good. So you could play this weapon. You could play in different Juners. People are trying to figure out how strong Kensa Junior is when people used to just say Vanilla Junior was it. People explored Kensa Junior. Now you have some like people that one trick Junior and do both. Like first example that comes to mind is Keen on Slaughterhouse. Like you'll see them do Vanilla Junior, but a lot of the time also they do Kensa Junior, and like they're really good with both. They've explored both. They've made that adaptation, and it's nice to see. And maybe one day we'll see custom. Who knows? But like, just those kind of things. People used to not think these weapons were worth investing in, or they just weren't strong. And because people explored them out of interest, they adapted, they learned more about them. Through one tricking, it made them seem more viable. That's how a lot of like meta evolution even happens. And just at the end of the day, for people that know, Azure is known for like looking into weird weapons other people don't consider. So sure, you might think I'm biased here, but just so many weapons in this game have potential, and not just one person or a few people can show off the potential that those weapons have to everyone else. It's kind of up to people that, if you want to explore it, go for it. I think the only exception, like I said, to where you can't one trick whatever you want is basically like in a team environment where you like something just conflicts too much, which can bring up issues. Like if you want a one trick E leader, but your team already has an E leader, then they're kind of out of luck, unless you find a compromise there. But E leader's not the best example on a weapon to one trick. Chargers are kind of a weird exception, because chargers across the class are all like very similar. They all just shoot straight and usually one-shot people. I mean, exception of Bamboo, but even then, not really with main power. Am I right? But like, if you're a charger one trick, you can probably play most of the chargers here. So that's kind of a weird example to bring up. But the point stands. Also, just to tie everything back together, as I said at the start of the video, you might be wondering, like I said, Azur's known, especially me, for just playing weird weapons, changing my pick like every single week. So why am I talking about one tricking? Well, that's part of it. I really want to one trick something right now. Like I said, I think I'm sticking to Slosher for a fair bit. But because I see the game in this way, because I see potential in so many different picks, I always just want to explore different ones. I need to just settle down and just stay in my little bubble and let everyone else handle everything else. But like, I see potential in so many different weapons, and if I was to commit to any of them for a long time, like I think any of them could show strengths that no one else really thought could be in them. So it's that interest that makes me switch my weapons all the time. But I also realize, because I'm making this video, because of things I've said, how valuable one tricking is. So I'm really trying to restrain myself here and just stick to Slosher for at least a considerable amount of time, and really see how far I can take it. But yeah, there was a lot of rambling there. I'm sorry, but I think it's all kind of stuff I've just been wanting to say about the topic. Any discussion is welcome. People who see this video, you want to reply, want to give constructive criticism, whatever, go for it. I kind of want to see discussion. I want to hear people's thoughts. I think there's a lot more to be said about this game that than there really like normally is. And there'll probably be more stuff like this coming from me in the future. So yeah, that's all I got for now. See you guys. Thank you for watching.